director of Eva Gallery, and I'm so pleased to welcome you all here tonight, and specifically to welcome Ernest Montenegro.
Sounds great.
To his gallery talk, which we have looked forward to for a long time, actually. Margaret Jacobs, our exhibition coordinator, will introduce Ernest in a more formal way with his resume and so on. I just want to thank Ernesto for being an important part of EVA. In addition to being an exhibitor here, he is also a member of our faculty, has taught a number of classes here. And I have a feeling you're going to play an increasingly important role here. Because we are having our plans for the future involve a broadening of opportunities for the study of three-dimensional art. And we are planning a new building on your side here and really focus on three-dimensional work, and we look forward to benefit from your expertise. But there's something about you that really puzzles me. And that is the wild energy you have about you. When you come here, either you can't come here because the weather is crazy, or you come here and the weather is crazy. I just don't know what it is. In January, we had a Sunday afternoon series focusing on sculpture. And you were scheduled for, I think it was January 18. It was a fine morning and good day, and suddenly, out of nowhere, came this violent icing. It was just like, it was from one second to the other. I remember out there the walkway just was covered with ice and all around the upper valley. So we had to cancel that one.
I have a special relationship with a sorcerer.
Well, I
was so nervous, I just said, you know.
I mean, today, you know, there's been this wild little snow flurries around, and I heard that you drove through one of them yourself on your way to Eva. So I take that as a very positive sign.
Okay.
It's creative energy all the way around, with some kind of unpredictability. And whereas I'm sure that what you have been involved in is certainly not unpredictability. It's carefully planned and conceived, and we look forward to hearing both about your exhibition here, Flatmensquared and the Tyranny of Isms, as well as a little bit of insight about your fantastic work, Our Hands Then and Now, that you did for Claremont's 250th anniversary. Welcome, Ernest, Ernesto, and thank you.
Sorry. My name is Margaret Jacobs. I'm Ava's exhibition coordinator. Ernest Montenegro of Claremont, New Hampshire, studied at Penn State College and immersed himself in drawing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. He held several apprenticeships, including one in Provence, France, with sculptor Skeaping, a stone carving apprenticeship in Sunnyside, New York, and a bronze casting apprenticeship with Richard Rosenblum. Montenegro is the recipient of several prestigious awards, including the Danghausen Prize from the Boston Center for the Arts and the Peter Abadie Award. He exhibits regularly throughout New England, including at the R. Michelson Gallery in Northampton, Massachusetts, the Brick Box Gallery in Rutland, Vermont, and Southern Vermont's Art Center in Manchester, Vermont. He has been involved in several public art commissions, the most recent one celebrating Claremont, New Hampshire's 250th anniversary. Dedicated to those who built the city, entitled Our Hands, Then and Now, the piece was commissioned by the Claremont 250th Committee and designed by Montenegro. It was installed in the city's visitor center green in early September 2014 and dedicated October 26, the anniversary of the signing of the city's charter in 1764. I thought that this fact was kind of cool. The 53-foot height was chosen because it is roughly equal to 17.64 yards, a reference to the year of the city's founding. Did you?
Actually, the man who thought that up is sitting in the chair, Martin Bernashez, and we owe him everything for this sculpture. So.
I thought that was cool.
No, it was great.
Okay. So please join me in welcoming Ernest.
I'm kind of doing double duty because, again, as Ben mentioned, in January I was supposed to give a talk about the piece in Claremont, and I feel that it might be interesting just to introduce that and talk about it a little bit. And I feel really lucky that Mark is here because Mark deserves a huge amount of credit. He's responsible for this thing being the height that it is, and for everything from the computer, importing the images into a computer and putting it on a CAD/CAM machine, and he was in charge of all of the steel works and everything at the plant. It could never have been done without him, so I applaud that. Anyway, I don't know if everybody can see this. I'll put it up here. Is that a better place? Anyway, this was a piece that was sort of conceived in a bizarre manner because the 250th, Claremont celebrated its 250th anniversary, and my first impulse was not to have anything to do with it because I realized that in those kinds of circumstances, usually people want a portrait of a so-called famous person or important person from the city, and I wasn't interested in doing a sculptural portrait, a freeze-dried portrait of anybody. So I avoided having any contact with the 250th committee. And then a little before Christmas, last Christmas, or the Christmas before last Christmas, I made a small sketch, went to the 250th committee, gave them sort of a sense of my idea if they would buy it, and got everybody surprisingly excited, and they said, well, come back in a month and maybe with something more developed, a model or something. So after Christmas in January, I came back with this model and even more because I decided to do my homework, and I went to Can-Am where Mark works and spoke with Carmine, the general manager, and Mark. We sat at this, we put the model in the middle of a large 10-foot table, and it was just the three of us. And the idea was to have a 10-minute meeting and see what would come of it. And I sort of gave them a quick synopsis of what my idea was. And Mark and Carmine were sitting there as I was talking, and they were sort of trading glances between one another. And they said, well, Carmine asked, he said, how big is this thing? How big do you want it to be? And humbly I said, well, 20 feet. And Carmine and Mark looked at each other again, and sort of a silence, and they said, well, 20 feet, how about let's make it 30 feet? And in the back of my mind, I thought, well, these guys are just trying to make more money, because my intention was just to find out how much this would cost, and then raise the money to pay the plant to do it. And the meeting lasted for about 3 hours, and during that process, during that meeting, the thing got even higher. It got to be 40 feet high. And so I found that a little daunting, but nonetheless, these guys work with huge pieces of steel, girders as high as this ceiling, actually. So this was like nothing. This was like pins and needles. Anyway, so I went back. I did some more. I got that as something in my back pocket. Oh, by the way, the most important part of this was, on top of building it, they offered to build it for free as a donation to the city. So, putting that in my back pocket, I went to another company, told them the story, and they offered to do their bit for free. And so I had these two major companies that were willing to do this. So I went back to the 250th committee with a model that they hadn't seen, and with those two components of somebody actually offering to build it and finance it in a manner that I never dreamed could be done. So it was a no-brainer. They signed on to it, and the rest was a beautiful history for that year. And it just, one thing led to another, and the thing got built, and it stands in Claremont in all its pride. And we even have a hawk that found it as a very expensive perch, and he sits up there now and again. A few little, I can pass these around. These are some samples of the hands that actually got welded onto this, and there are close to 800 hands. We took 1,000 tracings from people in the community, and that was a little bit of an interesting situation. We had a couple of venues where people came, children, bank presidents, whomever, to have their hands traced. And the idea was that everybody's would be anonymous. If you were a bank president and donated $10,000 or $25,000, still you would not be, marked up there as a special thing. So. And these are made of what's called weathering steel.
Wow.
And weathering steel is a special steel, and I hope, Mark, I have this right, that weathers, it rusts up to a certain point, 90 days, I think, something like that, and then it stabilizes and protects the metal from rusting any further, which is counterintuitive, but it works. You add nickel?
Yes, nickel.
Yeah, 5% nickel or something. And the icing on the cake was we got a picture of this in an international sculpture magazine. And so that put Claremont on a different type of map, perceptual map. And it stands in Claremont. It has lights installed so that at night it actually has two personalities. It has a daytime personality where it's this beautiful, I don't have a picture of it, maybe it's in there, it's this beautiful rusted iron look. And then at night it actually looks golden because the lights are from the interior, and it's a neat effect. So, any questions about that?
Is the metal has been painted then?
No.
Because what you see
The
there.
model, yeah, my idea was to have it gold leafed or make it look gold or painted gold or whatever. But in the nature of, the nature of the beast is people were doing things gratis, and I didn't want to push it too far. So, and it's beautiful the way it is. I love the fact that it's rust because the sculpture is mounted on top of what used to be an old foundry, so it's appropriate.
Do you want to say anything about the shape?
Oh yeah, the shape. And I could claim that the shape was, well, first of all, the shape reflects, there's a footbridge that crosses the Sugar River that has a curve to it, a catenary curve, and I wanted this curve to echo that curve, but vertically instead of horizontally. And without my knowing it, well, this is the interesting part. First of all, the ultimate height of this was 53 feet, which was 17.64 yards. And before the thing was even being built, I went to there's a pad, cement pad. I went and measured the diameter, and in a spooky way, the diameter is 53 feet. So who knew? Another interesting thing is the sail sort of shape is on the New Hampshire logo. And I didn't know that. It's a ship, right?
Sail ship.
Yeah, sail ship. And the other,
The state, the slogan is "All hands on deck."
who knew? I named it Our Hands Then and Now, and it's all hands on deck. So.
Wow. And also it's the shape of the state.
Yeah, and it's the shape of New Hampshire, in a rough way. we're going to make sure New Hampshire ends up, we're going to shave off a couple of towns. So at any rate, that's the story of Our Hands Then and Now. And needless to say, probably one of the most exciting projects I ever did because mostly because of the people I met, and like Mark and Carmine and many others that were involved with it. So, a great community project.
And what about the governor?
And oh yeah, Governor Hassan was there to switch on the lights and give it her blessing. So that was another cool part of it. And Donna, you're gonna have to help me here.
Okay. I don't like to help you. You're supposed to be doing this yourself.
I don't want to be the only bad guy.
What's this?
So now I will transition into my Flatmensquared part of this talk. But prior to doing that, we want to. Yeah, this is all showbiz.
Okay.
No, it's, and if anybody's claustrophobic, we'll let you out.
This is a crime scene.
This is a crime scene.
No, it says caution, but it's not crime tape. It's a construction tape.
You want us to move in?
Yes.
Now you can go right.
No, Mark, you have to, because I'm looking around the school. Gotta take the rest.
You're either in or you're out.
You're in or you're out. Right.
Talk about a captive audience.
Yes. That's the whole point.
We didn't want anybody to be broken up.
So I think I hope it's obvious that the reason I'm boxing you in is all the sculptures are made from boxes. And it's one of those weird things that only humans do as far as I know. They make squares and angles and like our carpenter universe, everything is a right angle and whatnot. And it's sort of, well, look at me, okay. Do I look better in a frame? And, you know, I could change it up and I could actually look this way and it's a mugshot, right? Or a Velasquez or John Singer Sargent portrait. And actually, you guys look better in this frame. I do this. So, anyway, I wanted to start out this talk by quoting the title of one of Paula Poundstone's books, and it's called "There is Nothing in This Book That I Meant to Say." And likewise, I wanted to make it known that in this series of Flatmensquared, there really is nothing in this series that I meant to say. So it's just like it happened, and it just sort of went its own way and did its own thing. And of course, we can later on retrofit what we want and pretend we were really smart and said something interesting, but you know, it just kind of did its own thing. And I wanted to start this out too by saying sort of the impetus for this project was about 4 years ago, and Michael will remember this, I got a phone call, and because prior to that phone call I had competed for a huge project in Boston, and I got a phone call. It was against 5 other Boston sculptors, and the phone call announced that I had won this competition. And you can imagine me putting the phone down and screaming to my son and my wife, and being quite high. So I went back down to Boston, signed the contract, and
What was it for?
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the project was a $500,000 project for the North End in Boston. And as far as projects go in my little life, it broke the sound barrier. I mean, it was just like, that's, I made it. Anyway, hubris is not a good thing. So I signed the contract and went down to Boston, signed the contract, and a couple of weeks went by, and one thing led to another, and slowly the project began to unravel, and it ended up that I completely lost it. It just fell through. And it's a complicated story, but nonetheless, you can imagine going that high. And if you go that high, you gotta go that far down. And so I took a major spiritual tailspin and went back to my studio, feeling pretty down. And although having had 25, 30 years worth of experience in a studio, I had disciplined myself to know better that with that kind of downward turn, the best thing to do is just go back to the studio and at least get there and sit there and hope that something happens. There's no such thing as a muse, I'm sure, but at least be there. So I went to my studio in a dark mood and just was there. And sat, and then I noticed a big pile of cardboard in the corner of my studio. And again, realized that one of the best things is either do a pot boiler or just do something. Because when you're doing something, sometimes things start to go into gear again. So I started doing something stupid. I started just cutting little 5 by 5 inch squares of cardboard. And while I was cutting the 5 by 5 inch squares of cardboard, I said, well, maybe I can glue these into little boxes. And so just to be busy, I started gluing them into these little boxes, and before I knew it, I had the whole floor covered in my studio, these rough little cardboard boxes or cubes. And again, while you work, things start to cook. I said, well, all these cardboard boxes, maybe I should start gluing the boxes together as in some sort of weird assemblage. And I had never done anything like that, so this was a whole new start. And it's good to sort of just, you go down the rabbit hole and just follow the lead. So I started to glue these boxes together in a very sort of unsturdy way. And my wife walked in and took a peek just to find out, to see if I was all right. And her first words were that I looked pretty lost. And you can believe me, I was pretty lost. But nonetheless, eventually I had 10 sort of very, very ugly looking structures like this hanging up. And they are ugly. I mean, these things are, first of all, I had to, it's like you got to jury rig everything. You have to put a pipe and glue that, and then, it falls apart or it bends or it breaks. And to make things worse, well, first of all, I had all these 10 assemblages, and they were all randomly assembled. And I decided, well, you know what if I poke some clay in these and see what happens if I can find a figure of some sort. And sort of being inspired by Hokusai's book on gestures, which are all these crazy gestures that he sort of put down. I just started putting these things, poking clay here and there, and a little piece like that, and it started to look like an arm, or it started to look like a leg or a head, and suddenly, having been lost, these sculptures found me. And they just sort of did their own thing. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but it really isn't. So the pot boiler kind of worked, or did work. And I pursued, I tried to, make them a little bit more and more refined. And then I told myself, well, wait a minute, let's really challenge Ernie and just try to hold off a little bit and just try to be as free as possible. So I didn't really noodle them. I just let them be more or less rough as you see them there. And suddenly I had a whole room full of these weird guys in dialogue. And there they were, all saying their thing, like a bunch of actors looking for a play. So my son at that point was living in the state of Washington, and he came to visit us, and he was always interested in seeing what I was doing in the studio and had not known anything about these pieces. So he came in and he looked at them, and he was actually aside from Donna, he was the first person to see them. So I was a little hesitant what his response would be, and he responded pretty enthusiastically. And then he sort of stood to the side and looked at one of them, and he said, Dad, there's a great word for this stuff. I said, what, Phil? He said, sprezzatura. And I looked at him and I said, what the hell is sprezzatura? And he said, well, it's a fancy Italian word or expression that means practiced nonchalance. And weirdly, that sort of gave me a directive. It sort of said, well, in a way, that will be my directive throughout this whole process. It's going to be sprezzatura all the way through, from these ugly little cardboard things to the molds, to the plasters, to the waxes, to the foundry, to the metal, to the patina, sprezzatura. So whatever happens, happens. And I tried to keep in the spirit of that throughout the whole process. And as far as I know, this is the third show I've shown these, and third time I've shown these, and so far I feel anyway had a pretty good response. So on that note, I will go full circle and again repeat Paula Poundstone's title of the book, that there's nothing in this series that I really meant to say, except what they are. Which also brings me to the idea, Michael asked me about naming them. I didn't name any of them because naming them would guide you to thinking, like a Rorschach test, something that they're not. And actually it opens it up for more interpretation. So I will now have a Q&A. Any questions?
Question, which your son was instrumental in kind of directing. What is his background or field?
He's 27 years old, or will be, and he's a graduate of an art school, but he's a poet.
Okay.
And has lived with art for his whole life. My dad was an artist, so it's in his blood.
Italian must be in his blood too, with coming up with the beautiful word sprezzatura.
Who knows where he got that? I know. I think that's the right translation. I don't know. Practice nonchalance, but it just fit like a glove. So in the spirit of that, it was pretty cool. Anyone else?
Well, I know you wanted to talk about the fact that you never really used stainless before.
Oh yeah. That's another component that was interesting. Don't you love it? It's metal. And, Mark is a metal man. And anyway, yes, that's another aspect to this whole thing. Okay, you have this ugly cardboard thing has to be translated, and the clay that I didn't bring has to be translated from here all the way to the metal. And that's a pretty big deal, because all the boxes had to be measured more or less precisely. And some of the boxes were even bent. And actually, this box belongs to this guy. So there you go. That's how ugly he used to be. Maybe he's still ugly, but he's at least he's metal. And anyway, so I had to find, again, the excitement about job work like this is that as you go, you learn as you go. And I had to find somebody who could fabricate these boxes. What? Financing. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, the scary part is, at this particular juncture, after that high of getting almost $500,000 job, I got very, very broke. So we took out a home equity loan, much to Donna's terror. And again, I had no idea how much this would cost, but I knew I wanted to get them cast. So had these boxes fabricated, and then took them to the foundry, and we used these cardboard things as a model to weld them all up in these same assemblages. Then what happens when you cast bronze, the bronze actually shrinks a little bit. So not only did the wax not fit, so I had to build the wax up enough so that it would fit in these boxes, take it to the foundry, have it cast, and then even then it still shrunk, where I had to actually add welds to it to build it up and make it fit. And the other thing about stainless and bronze, because that was my sort of dream to do, is that you can't weld bronze to stainless, because the stainless absorbs the heat so fast it warps. So it had to be silver soldered. Okay. Well, my intention was also to, I had these fancy ideas of putting beautiful patinas on these works. And I'm pretty good at doing patinas, so I could do a lot of different colors. In the process of silver soldering these, you have to get the bronze cherry red, which is like tempering metal, and it sticks. It's really, really strong. You can't break this. You really have to try hard to break it. And in the process, it turns this gorgeous, it's like tempering metal. It just turns this gorgeous, weird, some of them even look like pearls. Greenish, reddish, yellowish, even blue. And I knew right then and there, I said, there's no reason to go any further than that, because they just did it. And again, it's sprezzatura, just did it.
So,
And,
Ernest, where did you have the boxes, the steel boxes? And where did you have the casts made?
I had, firstly, the casts are made in West Rutland, which is an hour from my house.
Glenn Campbell?
Glenn's, yeah. Glenn, I've been working with Glenn for more than 20 years.
Okay.
So that's another thing. Founders, when we moved up here from Boston, I was terrified, because the foundry and the artist relationship is almost like a marriage. You're giving them something, and you're really afraid, if they blow it or ruin it. You don't know the personalities. So Glenn and I have a really good marriage. And Glenn did all the welding. He didn't weld the boxes, but he welded the bronzes to the boxes. And Glenn is like one of these wonderful... Silver solder, is one of these people who can do anything.
And the boxes were made where?
The boxes were made way up in Maine at a place called McCann's. And so they sent these very heavy boxes back to my house, loaded with 30 of these. And then I took them to Glenn, and we welded them together. So, and actually my original intention too was to make these mirror shine, because I thought it would be interesting to have the component of reflections would really enhance it. But I don't think you need that. So, any other questions?